Badlands, what is a Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Are you struggling with a diagnosis of one or more autoimmune diseases, such as diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, celiac, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, or chronic fatigue? Are you or a family member struggling with chronic infections, such as strep, pneumonia, bronchitis, cold, and flu? Do you experience gastrointestinal issues? Through individual counseling via telemed, Holistic Movement can help pinpoint your condition and relieve its effects on your life through holistic and integrative practices, including nutritional assessments, functional medicine workups, and referrals to traditional healing therapies like acupuncture and homeopathy. Request your complimentary virtual consultation and health assessment with Holistic Movement.
Visit badlandsmedia.tv/holistic or call 631-255-5003.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Knowledge Based with me, Justin. Jordan is absent this week. He must be out doing something really amazing because I haven't actually had a chance to speak with him at all. So in all seriousness, I hope he's doing well. I'm sure he is. I know he was moving, so I'm sure he just got caught up with everything that's going on. So you'll have to be kind to me because I did not know I was going to be doing the show solo tonight. But here we are. I'm up to the challenge. And hopefully I get a chance to show off the ability I have to talk off the cuff about interesting things. At least I think they're interesting. You know, obviously I can be my own best audience sometimes. So I also appreciate any support I get from you guys in the chat. Thanks, Sammy, for the Rumble Rants. Really appreciate it. Sammy, you're always a really good guy to support, and I appreciate it. We all appreciate it at Badlands quite a bit. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, what I wanted to do, since I had a full, hour to figure out that question, I realized that I could just show off or show you guys kind of my own personal process for exploring concepts and ideas. I've talked a lot about intrinsic knowledge, building that, and how useful that is. I talked a lot about it at the recent GART with respect to discernment and epistemology. So I'm going to do that in relation to community and what I think we need to do as people. One of the things we have to rediscover is how to live with each other in a peaceful way that doesn't, make us kill each other or so suppress the human spirit that all we have is a beige communist hell as our civilization. So if you're passionate like me about not only exposing the horrible corruption of this world, but actually trying to do something to change that and hopefully leave the world better than we found it, then I think you're going to find this conversation pretty interesting. So I'll be looking to the chat. So please pop in your comments, your feedback. If you want, I'll even extend the invite. If somebody wants to be bold enough to hop on camera and engage in some conversation, I'll go ahead and pull you on the show for a little bit. Okay, so let's get started here. Whenever I like to figure out an issue, I always like to start with first things first. Community, civilization. These are the topics that I want to talk about. So I want to define those for you. And usually, it might sound counterintuitive, but what I like to do is I like to go to official definitions. Not necessarily because they're more true than anything else, but because it gives my mind something to chew on. Sometimes if I don't have the definition in mind right away, I want to bring something up to give my mind something to chew on. And what often happens is the official definition will trigger a bunch of thought processes that end up with what I think is usually a better definition. So let's start with a basic one, civilization. What is civilization? It's something that I think this is one of these terms or these words that's been heavily manipulated because let's face it, we live in a manipulated reality. We live in a reality dominated by people who rewrite history, use doublespeak to redefine things, befuddle the language, beguile us with this befuddling language to keep us really confused and so that they can keep running the show. And while we're all distracted because we barely know how to do anything, they're on the other end of the knowledge spectrum. They have a ton of knowledge, probably way more than they even know how to do with, because frankly, they all seem to be drug addicted pedophiles. And so, you know, we want to get a clear definition, and we certainly want to know what a civilization is so that we can try to figure out what we should be doing to fix it. So I am going to pull from the dirty beast of Google and various sources. But like I said, if you guys have a definition or something like that, you want to suggest your own definition for civilization, please do, because I want to have this be as much of a dynamic conversation as possible. All right, so here's the definition I found. Now, I'm using AI. I'm using this thing that Google one day just decided to give me an invite into this AI, and I use it. And, you know, for those of you concerned about AI, I'll go on a little sidebar for a moment. As somebody who studies psychology, and what I call spiritual psychology, which in my estimation, you know, it's impossible to understand the human mind without including the spiritual purpose of reality, because the spiritual purpose is a priori, or at the beginning, ab initio. It's the thing that started it all off. So if we ignore the purpose of why we have a mind and psychology and a body, then we miss basically what all these tools are designed to do. Because if you think about it, and getting really deep already, but here we go. You know, the purpose of things is what starts everything off. And with respect to the world we live in, the universe we live in, things exist. Our body exists for a purpose. Air exists for a purpose. Ideas exist for a purpose. Everything exists for a purpose. And it's that purpose, understanding the purpose, that actually helps us make sense of not only the way things are now, but where they should be, what they ought to be. And that's kind of the whole point. We're here, I would argue. So anyway, with respect to AI it's touted as being this ultimate boogeyman that is going to completely destroy our civilization, a la the Terminator and things like this. And I think that's true to a certain extent. However, what we call artificial intelligence now isn't really general intelligence. You might have heard this term artificial general intelligence. And that term refers to intelligence that mimics human beings. There's something also called the Turing test. And the Turing test is when human beings engage with an artificial intelligence and they are not able to distinguish that artificial intelligence from artificial intelligence, and they confuse it with human beings. So some people think we've already hit the Turing test, that we already have AI sophisticated enough to fool human beings. But here's my take on that. And the people that are often touting the sweeping success of AI development are people that are atheists and don't really understand the purpose of reality. Now, that's not always the case, and that's not everybody isn't like that with respect to the AI development world, but a lot of them are, because I've listened to a lot of them, and a lot of them frankly don't really understand the human psyche. And if I make even more damning indictments to throw on the pile, modern psychology also doesn't really understand the human psyche all that well. Now, I don't blame that on the psychologists, because there's a handful of areas of human life, of aspects of our civilization, subjects that are heavily manipulated because they're weak points for the powers that be, or the cabal. The law is one of them. Philosophy is one of them, and psychology. These are the three pillars I talk about all the time. There's many others. We could put health in there. We could put social systems and relationships in there. So why do I bring that up? I bring that up because in order to determine that AI is as sophisticated as people think, you have to measure it against something. And the standard that we measure in general intelligence against is the one we have in psychology. And the one we have in psychology is pretty terrible and broken. Now, to give psychology credit, they've done a lot of amazing things in psychology. And certainly we have a lot of gratitude that we should place in the world of psychology, because we've discovered many things about the human psyche, the human nature. And ultimately, if you factor in the spiritual aspect, a lot more about the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, and what we're supposed to do here. But they don't really understand what intelligence is, I would argue, even though IQ, is one of these things that is one of the more developed aspects of psychology. So why do I say all this in this long rant? It's because AI, what we call AI, is really just a mimicry of human intelligence. Let me ask you this: if I was to give you, if I was to say that we could make a mannequin, so the things that wear clothes when you're in the department store, and that mannequin would have flesh, it would have blood, it would have a central nervous system, it would be able to respirate, it would be able to digest food, it would be able to have orgasms, it would be able to interact with people, it would be able to gesticulate. It would basically do everything you could imagine that a human being could do, except it wasn't a human being, it was just a mannequin. Would that mannequin become a human being because it can do all these things? I would say no, it can't. At the end of the day, no matter how sophisticated the mannequin, it's still a mannequin. It's not a human being. And just because it looks like a human being, just because it quacks like a human being, just because it farts like a human being, or whatever it is that we assign to the category of human beings, it doesn't mean it's a human being in the full and complete sense. Because human beings are spiritual creatures, our mind was created for a spiritual purpose. This is my conclusion, of course. And AI doesn't have any of that. I would liken the AI that we have right now more to like an externalized, very clunky, not so sophisticated subconscious. So your subconscious acts very much like an AI. And by that, I mean, if I was to ask you to think of something like a prompt, like, hey, think about a beach ball, think about the dinner you had last night, think about your first kiss. Those words are going to get decoded by your conscious mind. And in a way that we don't necessarily understand that much, the subconscious is going to receive those words as a prompt. And it's going to draw from your consciousness, from the surface of the water of your consciousness, beyond the layer you can see. It's going to pull up memories, pull up insights, pull up things that you don't necessarily have control over. You know, your emotions are another good example of this. Your emotions are generated by your subconscious. Arguably, I would say that's the case, but you can't control your emotions, you know, but you can't really control almost anything about your emotions directly. But what you can do is you can control what you think about and the frame that you put around what you think about. And that indirectly through the subconscious generates emotion. So I would say right now, what we call AI is not artificial general intelligence, because again, psychology doesn't really understand what intelligence is. And according to me, for whatever that's worth, we do not have artificial general intelligence. We have a sophisticated subconscious. The other thing is that it's extremely useful as a tool. And whether we like it or not, you know, a lot of times when I talk about how I use things like AI, people are like, oh my God, you're feeding the beast. You know, these systems are going to take over humanity, and you have played a part in doing that. And maybe that might be true. But my response to that is, who isn't? These systems are hooked up to all modern technology. Every conversation, everything that cell phone, or your smart TV, or your computer, or whatever, your car, your Fitbit, or whatever the things, your Apple Watch, all of that is gathering tons of data about us, whether we like it or not. So my response to the AI concern is something like, well, if we don't deal with the AI, it's still going to be advanced whether we like it or not, and then we won't be able to deal with it. I don't go as far as to say we need to merge with AI like Elon Musk. I do not want to merge with AI. I do not want a brain chip. But I think it's not as dangerous as we might think to use the AI. Whether we use it or not, that may not even matter, because it's going to get all our information anyway. And it's a pretty useful tool, as I relayed in the research panel. All right. So now that I've gotten my first long and arguably not necessary rant out of the way, let's define civilization. Civilization is a complex society. Let me pull up the thing here. One sec. Civilization is a complex society that has developed a writing system, government, division of labor, and urbanization. Civilizations are usually made up of different cities and have certain characteristics and cultural. So these are the things that civilization makes. And to kind of skip ahead on, what I'm trying to get at here, I would say a civilization is a group of people who decide to maximize the quality of their life by pooling their minds and resources together. The resources is, it's three, we could lump them into three categories. They're the physical dimensions, or physical bodies, They are the mental dimension, so the thoughts and our ability to apprehend the truth and reality and then build models or belief systems or knowledge from that we can use to navigate the world. We need our emotions. So our emotions are another kind of resource because our emotions motivate us. They act as the kind of fuel that gives life to a desire. And then lastly, our values. So our physical body, our mental body, if we want to use the term body, our emotional body, and then our spiritual body. So one of the things I wanted to mention about community is fitness. There's a lot we could talk about community, and this is hardly going to be an exhaustive conversation. I wanted to try to just get the ball rolling because I've been thinking about community and how to using community as a kind of antidote for all the problems we see in the world as like a master silver bullet solution for many years now. And the first time I had the idea, oh God, I think it was in like 2011. And I was trying to figure out like why in the hell it was that we were in this predicament that we were in, where there were cures for cancer that were suppressed, our financial system was weaponized against us, things like 9/11 happen all the time. Everything seems to be going to hell in a handbasket and has been for quite some time. What can we do to fix it, and how can we, stop it? And ultimately, the answer I came up with was community. The reason why we have our planet enslaved right now is because our communities have been hijacked. Communities are like a group mind, and a group mind has an epicenter, and that group mind is going somewhere. And if the community or the group of people isn't in control of that center of the community, kind of like a center of mass, then the community will be drawn forward, or it will be drawn into places it doesn't want to go. Very similar to if anybody's ever done jujitsu or wrestling or even done tug of war, like with a rope. When you're doing anything that involves pushing mass back and forth along an axis or a plane, when you push it forward or back enough, then what's called the center of mass gets out of this equilibrium, and then you fall. And so if you think about a community, when the members of the community lose their ability to control the center of mass of the community, they can't guide its direction anymore. Other people, other things are guiding its direction. So if anybody's ever, tried to go to a family vacation, and no matter how hard you try, you can't get anywhere on time. You finally get in the car and it's just like mayhem. You got some people want to listen to music, other people don't. Nobody can seem to agree on anything. And it's just like a nonstop procession of chaotic events. That, what I just described, is a community that does not have an adequately managed center of mass. Every community needs a leader and some leadership structure to keep all the moving parts together. Now, the leader can be highly benevolent, think about Jesus or figures like this, the Charles Martel from the Carolingian Empire, Marcus Aurelius, General Flynn, Donald Trump. So a good leader is going to recognize that the community is filled with other people who have equal standing. But what makes a leader of a community a leader is not that he's superior in every way, shape, and form, as if they were literally descended from heaven to lead that group of people. Although certainly what I just described has been used as an excuse to justify incompetent and inadequate rulers staying in positions of power. But the leader has to acknowledge, if they're going to do it the right way, and if they're going to respect the sovereignty and integrity of the individuals, they have to acknowledge the integrity of the individual, that the individual has free will, a mind, a body, emotions of their own. And really, we're all equal players in the game of trying to live the best life possible. So what a leader's job is supposed to be is to act as a representative for each individual. Because a community has all these moving parts, I mean, you can imagine, like I just described, a family environment where it's chaotic to get from point A to point B because there's not a lot of group cohesion and there's not a lot of direction. If you think about a musical band, if anybody's ever done any music before, if you're trying to get a bunch of people to in time play a piece of music and you have no direction at all, what you'll end up getting is chaos. You will not get music necessarily. Maybe, some of the modern artists out there who think duct taping a banana to a wall those folks who consider that art might consider total chaos to be music. I don't consider it to be music, and I'm sure folks in the chat would agree with me here. All right, so I've totally spaced and forgot to keep my eye on the chat. So let me just make sure I'm keeping an eye. I'm going to finish this point, and I'm going to get to your question C sus. So, the leader is supposed to acknowledge the inherent sovereignty of the individual, because ultimately every individual is like a processing node. We have the ability to think, which means we have the ability to process information. We have the ability to act, so we can be forces for change in the community, or forces for maintenance, and we have the ability to mobilize value. So how do we experience the value of what we're creating? That's kind of the emotional register. And if leader does that properly, then all of the members in that community feel like they're actually having their needs met. Because ultimately, this is where I'm going to mention contracts, which I mentioned so much. Ultimately, a community is just a bunch of people that have agreed to be their brother's keeper. Because I need food, water, and shelter, and you need food, water, and shelter, and then many other things. Why don't we pool our resources together? We can help each other, and if anybody's ever done any kind of group meals, whether on a holiday or a potluck or something like that, you've experienced the benefit of when a bunch of people work together productively and actually can create something of value. You can have amazing things. I mean, whether we like it or not, right now, we're already living in a civilization where profound levels of cooperation have been able to be affected to create all the splendors we see around us. The lights actually turn on. I can go to the bathroom and the water, runs properly. Many other things of our society. It's all a beautiful tapestry and a symphony of coordinated behavior. Now, the problem is that, like I was saying earlier, our communities have been hijacked, and they've been hijacked because the individual members of our community, what we call citizens in a civilization or a country, they're not in control anymore. They have effectively stepped out of the game, and somebody else is running the show. And I would argue that happened because of something I'm calling fitness. So we normally think of fitness as physical fitness, but I'm taking those other four aspects, or three aspects. So normally a physical fitness. I'm saying there's also something called mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Now, this term fitness has been used by eugenicists in the past, and I want to make clear, I'm not saying genetic fitness. I'm not using a term like fitness to justify, getting rid of people or anything like that. I'm using this term fitness because I want, hopefully, in the time we have here, the remaining 30 minutes, to communicate a really important point about communities, which is that the health and quality of the community is directly dependent on the quality of the members' participation in that community. All right, so that's going to frame the initial part of the conversation. So for the remaining episode, we're going to get into fitness, what it is, why it's necessary, and hopefully we can start to strip away and unlearn some of this bogus garbage we've learned from the cabal over the past X number of years. Because, again, there's a few subjects in our world that have been heavily manipulated, and community is one of them. It might be the most manipulated thing because it's kind of primary to everything. All right, so I see here, let me pull it up. We got, where is it? C sus B geochem 1 says, Justin, would you think of our consciousness as linked to light and how each individual perceives it? Also, do you think that's linked to realities and who we are, who is perceiving what? Okay, do you think our consciousness is linked to light and how each individual perceives it? I think so generally. The question's a little vague, so I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. But a few little nuggets I can throw out there is that we produce something called biophotonic energy. Biophotonic energy is apparently released by DNA, although it's not entirely clear where it all comes from. A man named Fritz Albert Popp discovered this back in the 70s, and it's been incorporated into mainstream science and biology. When you are experiencing high stress states, you release more biophotons than when you're not. We also know that we are bioluminescent. So each of us releases some amount of bioluminescent energy, It's very small, so it's not like you're going to see it just flicking off a light and going into a dark room. You need like special equipment to see and amplify this light, similar to like a PCR test. It takes the ambient light and then it keeps amplifying it until it becomes visible to you. So I do think generally, if we use the term light as a synonym for information, and we think about how we perceive information and how that affects us, then I would say absolutely the way we perceive our reality affects how we perceive our reality, what we experience, and ultimately what we think about, what we value, and what we do. Also, do you think that's linked to realities and who is perceiving what? I guess so. If you want to ask the question again, I'd love to dig into it more, but I'm just not entirely sure what you're getting at, and I don't want to take up the little time we have just rambling on. All right, so let me see if there's anything else. Okay, thank you. It's more of a question of consciousness, reality, and how each of us interpret it differently. Okay. Well, I think, but I'll answer it this way. I think each of us are unique aspects of God. I think God is an infinite reality, which means when I say infinite, I don't mean really big, although it has the quality of bigness. I mean, it's non-finite. It cannot be, it's not a single, it's not a one, it's not a two, it's not a half, it's not 1,000, it's not a googolplex. It's non-finite. It can't be measured in terms of one or any number for that matter. So when an aspect of God, like a seed, gets implanted into us or is at the core of us, whatever way we want to phrase it, like we are children of God, what I think that means is that we have a piece of God's infinite nature inside of us, kind of like at the core of us, animating who we are. And because God is infinite and absolute and ultimately unique in comparison to everything else, it means, this is my contention, that each and every one of us is a unique aspect of God. Well, it's like a Venn diagram. We've got a lot that's very similar, but then there's this piece that is not similar to anything. And that the sum total of that aspect of our God nature gives rise to the different interpretations, the different functionings of mind. I would argue even our fleshly body is adjusted and manipulated in some way by that unique essence in ways that I can't claim to fully understand, but it seems like that's a valid way of looking at it. All right, let's see. Is there anything else? Okay, cool. So I will say this, Rumble Me says we are all born with unique talents and gifts. That's exactly right. And getting back to the main subject. So we got all these people. We want to go and create a community. Let's imagine, let's put some concrete scenario on this. Let's imagine we want to go, I don't know, to a plot of land. I found this beautiful plot of land here in Georgia where I live, and it's 1,000 acres, and we're going to build a township. I'm kind of talking about a dream I actually have. So this will help concretize it a bit. No worries, CSUS. Not a problem at all. Appreciate the question. So let's imagine we're going to go live on this land, and we've got a whole bunch of different walks of life. We got people who are good at math, people good at science, people who are good at basket weaving, at clothes making, at farming, at all sorts of different things. Well, everybody has unique talents. And in order to mobilize those talents, we need a social system that allows us to coordinate all of our unique behavior. If you want to build a house, you can't just take a 15-person construction crew, slap a bunch of building materials down on the ground, and then just have them go at it. And through a bunch of random discoordinated behavior, you're going to get a house at the end of the day. If you're to do that, what you're going to get is construction noise. You're not going to get a house. You're probably going to get, at best, you get a few structures that aren't properly linked together, probably aren't safe, and will end up being condemned by the city. So you need a system to coordinate all this. And more importantly, each individual has a kind of duty to their community. Like your community is going to give you something. It's going to give you a lot of things, actually. Just a sidebar on this, when we ask the question, what do we even get out of our communities? Well, it's hard to see that now because our communities are so broken in the modern age. But basically a community supplies you everything. If you think about your relationship to your family, your parents, the people around you, your school, everything, like literally almost everything that makes up who you are came from somebody else that you interacted with. And when in situations where people are raised outside of community environments, so like feral children, although you can't actually, an infant cannot survive without physical interactions. That should tell you how important communities are. But feral children, horrible as it does, as it happens, they do happen. And a feral child can't speak, can't think properly, can't take care of itself, can barely do anything. They're almost totally and completely dependent on social support to continue surviving. So community is critical. You get almost everything from community, which means if we learn how to master this thing properly, not only can we have way more benefits in our lives than we currently have, but we can actually have a really useful tool to continue getting benefits in the future and protect and safeguard the things that are the most sacred to us, like our family, like our rights, things like this. So a community, there's a relationship that Kant, I forget his, Immanuel Kant, I believe, or God, what's the other guy's name? But anyway, some prolific philosophers from the 18th and 17th, 18th, and 19th century use the term of a social contract. And a social contract is just an agreement. It's usually not written down, although it should be. And the agreement is that each citizen will do their part to contribute to the whole of society. And for that, they will receive some benefit. So that's a social contract. So this idea of duty in community is really not all that, foreign. Almost everybody at some level recognizes it. But there's a component that I was thinking about recently. And the reason why I was thinking about it is this. We're going to this Georgia Badlands community. Let's call it the Badlands compound. We're going to have food. We're going to have water. We're going to have at-home education. We're going to have healing centers. We're going to have testing centers. We're going to have advanced science centers that allow us to develop better technology that doesn't screw up our bodies and our health so badly. I mean, I'm saying this as an analogy, but I really want to build this. This is something I'm so passionate about doing, and I'm actively trying to figure it out right now. And it's part of the reason I'm thinking about this. So one problem we have now, and I experience in my personal life, and I'm sure everybody who's listening to me now does, is how do you deal with the situation where people in your social group or your community aren't doing their fair share? Or they are doing their fair share, but then it's not effective. It's not actually producing the result it was intended to do. How do you deal with that? I mean, it's a serious problem. In our current society, we're so detached from these key skills about how to maintain good social order that they might seem a little foreign, although some of the older folks out there might recognize some of these. In order to keep the community going, it's doing something. A community isn't just a place where a bunch of people hang out and sing kumbaya and get drunk and then just go, disappear into their houses. Although certainly that might be the community in Burning Man. The community has to do something. There's a specific goal. Now, if the goal is not specific, what you get is mediocrity. Mediocrity is the opposite of excellence. Excellence is when you get what you plan to get and it's actually good. If I'm striving for excellence with respect to building a house, when I've done building that house, it's actually a house. It's level, the doors work, everything works in it, and it'll actually last for some period of time. So excellence is critical to a successful community because, again, a community is doing something. It's providing the individual needs, which means if the community isn't serving the individual properly, then the individual is going to start to resent the community, and that's when crime starts. As a matter of fact, what I'm talking about right now, this is one of the subtle cultural warfare tools the cabal has been using on human beings for hundreds of years. Why is it that people in the inner city seem to have barely any respect for law and order, or seem to be more open to doing antisocial behavior like, running drugs or engaging in criminality, stealing, things like this? Well, it's because they're surrounded by people they have no personal connection to in many cases, and they're underserved by their community. Our societies are designed to create underserved populations because the cabal need an underserved population that they can mobilize to harangue and harass the other part of the civilization, so that we're constantly fighting each other instead of looking to what our real problems are. Oh, yes. All right. So I see some. CISA says Justin would be smart to dig in the buildings so they are partially underground. saves off the heat. Yes, I had that very idea when I was in college. I thought to myself, I went to school for physics, and I'm like, man, the way we design our houses is a mess. Why do we don't just design the houses so that they're thermologically neutral? And you can do that. But anyway, let me I need to be good about my ad read. So here we go. We're going to get into one right now. Wait. Hold on. Sorry about that. I don't know why my share screen disappeared. Hold on. There it is.
Other public sources of water may contain harmful bacteria and parasites that can affect your health and that of your pets. But with Oneness water purification drops, you can easily ensure the safety of your water. Our chlorine dioxide drops are safe to use when you follow EPA and FDA guidelines, and they've been used for decades worldwide. To use, simply mix equal parts with each bottle in a separate container using the included droppers to create the ideal solution. With our easy-to-use and effective chlorine dioxide drops, you can reduce exposure to harmful contaminants and maintain optimal health for you and your pets.
All right, there you go. Moving right along here. So listen, this wild story of corruption from friend Ross Givens. Ross used to be a VP at a major Wall Street bank, but he left to help regular Americans even the score. Here's what he's uncovered. Democratic Rep. Catherine Clark bought Hologic stock 1 week before the company was awarded a $19 million COVID-19 contract. Congressman Earl Blumenauer was buying defense company stocks on the very day Russia's first invaded Ukraine. And shocker, Nancy Pelosi made $1 million bet on Tesla just weeks before Biden mandated the entire federal fleet go electric. The fact is, elites use their positions to get filthy rich at your expense. But thanks to Ross's days on Wall Street, he knows how to use an obscure database to track exactly what the elites are trading. So you can follow along with them for big potential winners, including trades that paid $520, $1,090, and even $1,787% in profit. That's 17 times in profit, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, Ross just uncovered a massive trade made by a very important person. You can get a free copy of his trade right now by clicking the link below or going to Badland Insiders. Ross is also hosting a free webinar where he'll explain how you can track these trades yourself. Get access now. That's badlandinsiders.com. All right. So here we are. So fitness. So community, we got to do something. I'm going to use a house analogy, but I want you to keep this Badlands community in mind. And generally, I'm encouraging you to think about this because it can seem really daunting and like there's no hope in the world, that there's no hope for, if you're a guy, younger man, and I felt this many years ago. I was like, man, how the hell am I going to find a decent wife in this crazy world we live in? There's a lot of problems we face, and it doesn't seem like there's any solution, but there is a solution. And the solution is us. We got a lot of work to do. None of us know how to live in community anymore. A lot of us have social problems, issues from childhood, emotional issues, dependencies, addictions, lack of development in many areas. But we can do it. I know we can do it because when you look at history, it's not like this is the first time a great awakening has happened. There's been many times in history where people in their current generation woke up and were like, holy shit, we got to get it together. I use this analogy on an interview that will air here in a couple weeks, which is how long does it take for a room or your house to become unlivable from not cleaning it? Well, it takes quite a while, actually. I've been in houses where the people never cleaned before, and it was really, really bad, but it took like years for them to get to the point where they actually had to have like an intervention. But at the end of that, how long does it take to fix the problem? All it takes is one day or a couple days of dedicated effort with some people that you know and love and trust to completely turn that house back into a livable condition. I would argue we here, the people listening to my voice on Badlands and every other place where patriots and freedom fighters exist, we have that same power and opportunity. All it takes is dedication, persistence, and willingness to learn what needs to be learned and unlearn what needs to be unlearned. So that leads me to the key aspect of this episode, which is fitness. If you're living in your house with your family, when you hear fitness, think about this. If your kid is maybe he's 14, 15 years old, you got a young man in your household. He's like a lot of other young men. He spends way too much time on the computer, maybe watching even porn, God forbid, certainly plays way too many video games. Well, what happens when you don't physically exert your body is your body loses its fitness. So what is fitness? Well, the definition of fitness I want to prime everybody with here is fitness is the ability to mobilize your capacities and your faculties to take advantage of an opportunity when it comes across your path. Something like that. I'm going to say it another way. Fitness is the ability to take successful action on an opportunity that you encounter. We can also define it as fitness is the ability to do what needs to be done when you need to do it. But in every capacity, whatever way we look at fitness, it's always that you're able to successfully do something. And we usually do things. Why? Because we value the thing we're doing. We're not doing it because we don't want something. You're not cleaning your house because you don't want a clean house. You're cleaning your house because you do want a clean house. Well, community is the same thing. There's certain things as people, as individuals, that you have to avoid to be healthy and be fit. You have to avoid a lot of glyphosate or Roundup. You got to avoid eating toxic food that's filled with mold. You got to avoid COVID-19 vaccines, potentially. So you got to avoid a lot of stuff. And if you do that, then you won't have the negative effect that comes from whatever it is, eating rat poison, we'll say that. But there's some areas of fitness that you can only achieve by doing something. And by not doing something, you make yourself unfit. So that's an idea I want to implant in our head with respect to this conversation, because the reason why fitness is important is that the health of the community and its ability to minister to the individual, so that individual can be happy and still pay their share into the community, is directly dependent on that community's ability to mobilize all of the resources it has, including people. So if you're living in a house with a 14-year-old video gamer who spends 8 hours a day playing whatever video game is popular right now and staying up until the wee hours of the night, well, when let's say you go into your backyard and you trip on a rock and you turn the rock over and you realize there's a giant gold vein in your backyard. And you're like, shit, I want to take advantage of this golden vein. I want to get my kid and we're going to see if we can dig up some of this gold. I watched a homestead rescue the other day. I know you can use like various devices and things to kind of create your own gold refining plant. We're going to do that. We're going to clean up and make a bunch of money. So you go to talk to your kid and you've somehow managed to pull the controller away from him. And you're like, hey, man, let's go. And you somehow managed to get him to agree to this, which, good on you for that. But then when he goes to dig his first shovel into the ground, he goes to, put it in, lifts up, and you hear like a kind of cower, like, oh, and he just pulled a muscle in his back. Damn, well, he's out of the game. Now he can't do anything for potentially 2 weeks. Then 2 weeks goes by and you go back into the house again and you're like, hey, now that your back's healed, hopefully you got physically fit before, let's go back into that backyard. We got this gold that's just waiting there for us to harvest. Let's get that gold out of there. And he's in an emotional funk. His girlfriend broke up with him a week later and he's still dealing with that. So now he's not emotionally fit to take advantage. He can't mobilize the motivation and the tenacity and the ambition to take advantage of that opportunity. Let's say you go and talk to him and he doesn't get it. He's like, gold? Why do we go dig up gold? Doesn't money come from the machine or your bank? Why we just get money there? What the hell you got to waste your time digging up gold for? So it's like he just doesn't get it that there's a massive opportunity to support the family and, you know, potentially other people if you just mobilize the energy and the effort to get this gold. Now there's the last one. So I just covered physical fitness. He sprained his back. Emotional fitness, or the lack thereof. He was not emotionally fit, so he couldn't mobilize the emotion of motivation to take advantage of the gold opportunity. And he couldn't, he was not mentally cognizant enough to understand the benefit and see what he could actually do. So what's the last one? Well, it's spiritual fitness. Now, what does spiritual fitness mean? Well, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just kind of fast, rapid fire through some of this. I would define spirit as character and value. So what makes up your character? When you think of your wife, there's all these attributes. You know, they love X. They don't love Y. These kind of things. Well, those are value statements. And when we think about character or the spirit, we tend to think about the essence, the quintessence of something. You know, when somebody has the spirit of X person in them, we think that a kind of version of them is in there. It's like if somebody was, let's say you went to a band at a local bar and you heard a guitar player and it sounded like, man, it was like Jimi Hendrix was reincarnated in that man. Well, that statement is a characterological statement of the fact that spirit, the essence of something, transfers into something else. And that thing that it transfers into now has the identity of, it can be identified as an aspect of the thing that it got the spirit from. The kid who plays like Jimi Hendrix, when I say, man, kid, you play like Jimi Hendrix, I'm making a spiritual, characterological, value-based statement that I would say is a really good way to think about an aspect of spirit. Now, it's not the only thing to think about an aspect of spirit, but for our purposes of our conversation, it fits perfectly. So spiritual fitness is, can you maintain the good character despite life's trials and travails? Let's say it's this kid again, you're 14 and 15-year-old. You're trying to get him to go help you dig up this gold vein in your backyard. And you go there and you're like, hey, you want to help me? And he says, yeah, I'll help you. And you actually get in the backyard. He managed to deal with his other fitness. He's emotionally present. He's physically able to handle it. He's mentally cognizing what's happening. And things seem great. He's digging up the gold. He's running it through the machine. You guys are getting like big fat stacks of gold. And then the next day, you go to leave the house, and that bag of gold that you worked so hard to procure with your son, now it's missing. You're like, oh, what happened? Well, come to find out, your son had taken that gold and he had sold it off to a pawn shop so he could get a bunch of money so he could, I don't know, go to a concert with his girlfriend or something like that just broke up with him, try to win her back. So what I just described is characterological unfitness. When you violate your principles, you are engaging in a characterologically or spiritually unfit state. So with respect to community, fitness is critical because if a member of the community is going to be able to do what they need to do in the community to benefit the community, then they have to be fit. They have to have their principles in order spiritually. They have to have their values in order. For example, one of the things that I think is important for a community is dedication. Like you get some very fine line to walk because you got to encourage the members of the community to put the community first to a certain extent, but you can't put the community so first that the community is just, or the people are slaves to the very community they're trying to create. So it's a fine line, but you got to have, you got to define the role properly. And I use an analogy like a musical band or a baseball team or sports team. When you have a baseball team, you're not just going on the field to run around the bases and do whatever the hell you want. There's a purpose. You're trying to do something. There's a goal in mind. And a community has the same thing. There's a goal. When you have a goal, you have a value, you have an ideal, and that ideal is itself a yardstick. It helps you measure success. So if your goal as a basketball team is to win a bunch of games, then there's things that every player in that team has to do to actually be able to win a game, which is a fairly complicated activity. And that means every member of that team has to be committed. There's going to be points in when players of that team are tempted to go, I don't know, to the strip club or eat a bunch of food that's going to make them sick or maybe dope themselves and potentially get disqualified. things like this. And they have to learn and commit themselves to whatever standard was defined by the goal. And the community is exactly the same way. Now, what happens when you get relaxed with your standards? Well, if you're in a family, if anybody's ever been in a family where the standards get relaxed because the leader of the family or somebody like that isn't enforcing them, then you get crappy results. You get people talking all over each other. You get people bickering with each other. You get all that kind of stuff. With respect to a sports team, you're not running plays properly. You got people dropping the ball. The players show up half drunk from the night of partying before, so they can't run around the bases properly or execute plays properly, things like this. So when it comes to a community, it's the same basic idea, except it's not just sports now, it's everything. Because ultimately, and this is the kind of like shocking truth, or it's not shocking, but it's like something it's hard for modern people, I think, to grapple with, but we have to do it. It's one of these pills we just have to swallow. Because everything we do as individuals affects the world around us, especially our community. So if we start stealing from the people around us, then they don't have trust and faith in the community. They aren't going to want to invest in it as much. And that's one of the ways that the cabal have destroyed our cottage industry. You destroy the principles by which people adhere to good business standards and good work ethic, and then you can't rely on the work population anymore. So then you have to bring in international workers where they do care about it. Here in the United States, asking people to get to school on time is like a racist activity, apparently. But over in China, where a lot of manufacturing happens, there's the Asians in particular, and that whole continent is very good about, hey, this is the job we got it done. Your pride as a person and your ability to not bring shame upon your family is directly dependent on you doing your duty as a member of the community. Now, we don't have to get crazy draconian with it and shame and guilt people into submission. And this is a question I have. I'm asking all of you, what I've just done, hopefully, is laid out the fact that if we want to live in a better world, there's nobody's going to magically do it for us. Donald Trump isn't going to run, ride across the country with a white horse and just, wave his magic wand and create benevolence and excellence all over the place. What's probably going to happen is he's going to take away a lot of the bad guys, and we're going to have a lot of work to do, like a mountain of work to do. We're probably going to spend the rest of our lives just trying to tease out all the stuff that needs to be teased out so we can actually leave the world in a better place. So for us here with fitness and community, the question is, how do we as a community encourage everyone in the community to do their duty, to stay physically fit? Turns out when it comes to physical fitness, most of the ailments people associate with aging are actually just because they're not physically fit. If you're one of the people that has that, I know you're probably like, Justin, back off, man. There's no way. That's not the case. But in my studies, that is unfortunately the case. Back problems, vision issues, digestive problems, cancer, all sorts of stuff can be directly attributed to the lack of physical fitness. Your body's a machine. It needs to be moved in the way it needs to be moved. And when you do that, you get incredible health. Super agers and some folks, I can't remember right now, Ryan is the one who told me about this. There's some folks in, I believe it's in China. It's a very remote community in China. Most of the people, or maybe Japan, most of the people there live till they're like 100, 110. And they're not like, bags of meat in a wheelchair. They're actually physically fit, moving around, living life at that age. And one of the things they have is they instill within their culture a tradition of moving the body, using things like Tai Chi, Qigong, things like this, in which those systems, those motion systems in my studies of what physical fitness is, so that I can better embody it myself, you need to muscle strengthening. So you need to strengthen your muscles. You need to do stretching of the ligaments. You need to work out the fascia. So the fascia is the connective tissue that connects everything in your body together. And then you tie all that together by doing what's called snap motion. So you're actually moving your body in ways quickly, because for whatever reason, the snap motion, it kind of like binds all those pieces together. And the other thing you can do is posed strenuous exercise. So there's this pose called the horse pose, where you're standing like this. Well, I guess I'll stand up for a second. You're kind of like squatting like this. and it's like you're sitting in a chair, but you're holding it all up on your own. And they do that for like, in some cases, 10 minutes. Now I can barely do it for a minute, but the first time I did this, which Ryan was encouraging me for weeks, and I finally did it. The first time I did this horse pose, it was incredibly strenuous, but I had all this back issue go away. I had this, like, I mean, not that I have a lot of back problems, but, you know, I sit around and look at a computer all day long, so you're going to get issues. And yeah, a ton of the back issues went away immediately. Like, I had this little sciatica pain that I normally get in the morning from whatever reason sleeping, gone immediately. I had even like weird stomach and intestinal kind of funk, gone immediately. So physical fitness, this is one, remember, the cabal have destroyed our knowledge of what it means to be healthy. They didn't just take away healthy food and healthy habits. They made us believe that unhealthy things were healthy. You know, how many doctors in the modern age prescribe physical fitness as a way to treat disease or illnesses? Almost nobody. How many doctors don't even consider nutrition in their health protocols? You know, and again, not to blame doctors necessarily. This is the system. Oh, hey, buddy. You guys can see my cat. This is Leo. So physical fitness is huge. And the more we do it, interestingly enough, the more you're fit in all these areas of life, the more your fitness balances out across the board. When you're physically fit, it improves your emotional fitness and your mental fitness. When you're mentally fit, you're able to motivate yourself easier emotionally, and you tend to do things that are actually good for you because you've worked it out logically. Physical fitness. When you're emotionally fit, you know how to process emotions. And when you process emotions properly, the amazing benefit of all of your emotional systems, because there's like 10 different things your emotions do, they are all online and working properly. Hey, buddy. So let me just go through some of the other fitness, and then I'll get to some questions. So physical fitness is maintaining the physical health of your body. I just listed some different ways to do that. I would lump physical fitness in the category as well as diet. So not only is physically moving your body important, you need to eat the right food and not eat bad foods. So emotional fitness. What's emotional fitness? Well, this is something that modern people, because unfortunately almost everybody suffers from some measure of dysregulated central nervous system, a lot of us do not have properly functioning emotions. And it's so bad that unfortunately for a lot of us, our emotional centers are barely functioning at all. And a lot of us, because of that, we self-medicate with weed, alcohol, benzodiazepines, coffee, chocolate, all sorts of different things to self-regulate our emotional state. But when your emotional state's actually working properly, you feel genuine and authentic emotions when things happen. If you ever had it happen where like you've been working all day long and you come home and your wife tells you something that should normally trigger something really amazing, like, hey, one of the kids had a grandkid today, or my friend down the road got married recently, or something that would normally evince an emotional response, and it's just like flat. That's because you're emotionally dysregulated. Or another thing that can happen when you're emotionally dysregulated and you don't have emotional fitness is you overreact with negative emotions to fairly minor things. Like somebody pulls in front of you on the highway and it's like, it's like the high crime offense, and you're like seriously pissed off to the extent that it ruins your whole day. That's emotional dysregulation and lack of emotional fitness. Or, you see somebody getting brutally hurt on the side of the road or something, and because you don't like cops or something like that, you revel in their pain and suffering. So you're taking joy in things that arguably are negative, that are harmful to other people. That's also a sign of emotional unfitness. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens with emotional fitness. But generally speaking, when your emotions are fit and working properly, they're active, they're alive, they respond to things that are happening in a full complement. You're not just always happy all the time or always depressed all the time. You experience the range of emotions. And then lastly, your emotions, although we could argue they're more of the feelings and instincts, they also act as kind of like an autopilot. So when you're moving through life using feeling to check things like, should I eat this? Should I do this? Should I do that? And you use an emotional check to do it. That's emotional guidance. And if your emotions are working properly, you can actually trust your emotions to make good decisions for you. I don't know about you, but my emotions usually do not make good decisions for me. Usually, they're telling me to eat things I shouldn't eat, or indulge in things I shouldn't indulge in, or whatever, all sorts of crap. So unfortunately, the thing that we tend to be the least fit in, I would say, is emotional fitness. Intellectual fitness is a little easier to wrap your head around. It's can you absorb the truth accurately? That's one aspect of intellectual or mental fitness. Can you be present when something happens? So, for example, if something new happens and you're in the middle of something, can you disengage from that one thing to engage in this other thing here in a way that's actually productive? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know about you, but if you've ever lost something, if you've ever been absent-minded, if you've ever not gotten something that was pretty easy, but it took you a few times, well, this is some aspect of mental unfitness, and there's various things that we can do to address that. Discernment is another good thing. Discerning truth and value is really important. When you're mentally fit, you can accurately discern the truth. Doesn't mean you have a truth divining rod where no matter what gets thrown at you, you're going to just cut through it and see exactly what's happening. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you're just honestly appraising the information that you're receiving. Like, oh, well, this happened. Like Donald Trump, I don't know, let's say somebody arrested Donald Trump tomorrow. You could sit there and carefully consider the possibilities of what that means without fixating on one of them and irrationally discounting the other ones. So honest intellectual activity, I would say, is mental fitness. The last one, spiritual fitness. Spiritual fitness is, as I mentioned earlier, characterological. Who are you? What are your values? Do you know what they are? Have you defined what your values are? Do you have any values that are in cross purpose? Do you value being physically fit, like slim, sexy, strong, that kind of thing? And then at the same time, you're eating bonbons until 4 a.m. and you never get physical exercise, and you always have a problem with that candy bin at the office, and you can't manage to shake that gut or that flat tire around you. Well, you're at cross purpose there. That cross purpose is a sign of spiritual unfitness. You're trying to go to different places at once. God designed the universe when it came to spiritual value in kind of a polarized way. There's going towards God, and then there's everything else. And I would map it out as a circle. So you got God in the center, and then you got all these different ways you could go. They're not like God. But ultimately, the task when it comes to being spiritually fit is to use your mind, which requires mental fitness, emotional fitness. So you got to use your emotions to act as the divining rod for what you react if you try a piece of food and you feel something in response to that food, like, man, that tasted good. Then that's because your emotions are doing the compass activity they should be, which is saying, hey, what you just experienced, something about that you like. Now, don't just leave it at there and just be like, all right, well, I like this, and now I'm just going to forever do that without question. No, you got to still use your mind to think about these things. But when you have spiritual fitness, you can discover new values. You can coordinate those values with the values you've already discovered, and you can and let go of old values. If you're somebody that you just can't manage to stop doing the thing you did 20 years ago, even though it's not good for you, there's a little spiritual dysregulation going on there, and spiritual unfitness. So to close out this episode, hopefully it's been at the very least entertaining and engaging for you. My thoughts on all this is that I personally try to stay as fit as possible, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I cannot do that well all the time. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if I could say I do it well at all. There's some things I do great, other things, man, I'm just a total mess when it comes to certain things. And this is what community's for, because one of the interesting things about community is that when you're socially fit, to add a whole other level of fitness, then the people in your life can actually support you in the other 4 types of fitness. They can actually call you out when you're making bad decisions, intellectual fitness. They can call out your emotions and say, hey, man, you were way too emotionally charged about this, or it's like you're emotionally dead. What's going on? Let's talk. You can talk stuff out, because it turns out you can't regulate your emotions directly. I can't just be like, I want to be happy now, and flip a switch and I'm happy. the way that we influence our emotions is through our mental and physical activity, to put it generally. So when you talk to other people, when you open your mouth and you use your words to be honest and have what I call intellectual intimacy with people, then you expose your heart, you expose your mind, you stand naked in front of people, and all of the crap that comes from a mental, emotional, and physical unfitness tends to dissolve. Not immediately, not like a force of magic, like God's hands laid itself down upon you, although that has happened sometimes, and I've witnessed it. I more so mean that the blocks in your being that are holding you back can start to get peeled away. So social fitness is critical. And what might be the worst in terms of our fitness levels is social fitness. We barely talk to each other. We don't know how to be honest with each other. When we are honest with each other, it often causes a lot of confusion and problems. We don't necessarily know how to work out interpersonal issues in a way that allows us to protect and coordinate our communities. And we don't know how to identify toxic, malevolent psychopaths that weasel their way into our communities and fill our heads with all sorts of bad values, bad ideas, and emotionally toxic ways of being, not to mention physical stuff too. So fitness is huge. All right, now that I've sufficiently rambled on for most of the show, let me check the chat here. I'm glad you guys like Leo. Leo's my wife, Maddie. She loves that cat. It's a big cat. Yeah, that cat's something like 12 kilos. He's a beast of a cat. Yeah, we love him. He's got a little gray tabby thing going on too, so he's great. Let's see. Just looking for a portrait done with me and I guess I should probably share this tab. Hold on. With me and Leo, that's funny. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Michael. You don't exercise. I know I should, but I hate to sweat. I hear you. Yes. There's some things, I don't know if you're familiar with Wim Hof, but Wim Hof, there's a whole component of bravery and free will activation. There's all these things that God put in the universe that when you first encounter them, you do not want to participate in them. They are icky, they're painful, they're sweat-inducing, physical fitness, and most of the fitness levels are like that, as a matter of fact. You don't want to talk to your wife about that crazy thought you had that you're ashamed of, but you need to get off your chest anyway, or you're going to hold it against her or yourself. You got to do that. You got to push through that. So there's all sorts of things, kind of like the boils or pimples of the spiritual realm, if you want to call them that way, that are icky, nasty, and you just got to suck it up and deal with it. But what's crazy, and this is something that Andrew Huberman discovered with the Huberman podcast, and something I've talked extensively about, the xiphoid process, or the part of our neurology that activates when we use our bravery and courage. It literally transmutes the thing. I hated doing exercise for many years of my life. And for whatever reason, or not, I knew the reason, but I'm saying at some point I decided I needed to tackle this. And I used my courage and my will to face it and be like, you know what? I'm not going to let my triggered, damaged emotions around this thing that I know is good for me hold me back. I'm going to do it, and you'll get on board at some point, inner child. And what ended up happening is now I love exercise. So using your free will and courage to try things out provisionally, have faith in the fact that it's probably good for you as long as you've worked it out mentally, you'd be surprised what you can do. Let's see here. Lots of awesome conversation happening in here. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like there's many questions. Oh, thanks, Sammy. Appreciate it. I got one more ad left. What's up, Toker? So, all right. So we're basically done. Hopefully everybody's enjoyed the programming as of now. If you liked this whole community discussion, let me know. I'm really curious. I've had the dream to create a think tank and do a little bit more what we might think of as productive truth or activity. Not that what we do now is not productive, but we can talk about news stories and stuff like this till the sky comes home, or till the sky falls on us and the world ends. But eventually we got to like actually try to work together to solve real problems. And I know some people are doing that. I think we have a huge and amazing community, and I would love to do that with people. And I think this community thing is huge. I'm like, how hard would it be? Think about what the founding fathers did and the people that colonized the Americas back before the American Revolution. Some of these people were just like us. The Puritans and some of these other folks, some of them not so nice, were they were persecuted. They were living in their own cabal back in the day, dealing with their own insanity back then. So you know what they did? They said, you know what? If we don't have the courage to let go of what we're depending on right now so we can have faith in creating something better in the future, it will never come. We have to take some risks. We have to go and try this whole new world thing out. And they did. A whole bunch of people got together. They had to assemble their team. And I think that's one way we have to deal with this community thing. In the beginning, when I envision the community, I don't envision like anybody can get in, regardless of their skill level or commitment level. No, because a community is something you're building, and you need a good core crew to safeguard the vision of the community. What tends to happen, especially in the modern age, is that people don't really know how to be in community with each other. They have all these bad assumptions about what the community has to do for them and what they're entitled to do, or all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, the weak links end up destroying your community. I've attempted to start several communities. Nothing as in depth as what I'm talking about now, but this is like 10 years ago. Part of the reason I went to Morocco in 2014 and 15 was because I was just trying to join an intentional community of a bunch of people I met on the internet. And it was the One People's Public Trust, for those of you who know what that is. Ultimately, I think all of that was just a bunch of bunk, but it led me to Ucadia, which has been fantastic and amazing law knowledge there. But in any case, what I observed in our attempts to start a community is the weak link effect, that you could have 10 amazing people who have incredible knowledge, skill, resources, devotion, heart, all that great stuff. But if you've got one or two loud people who have no problem interrupting the flow to steal the attention of the rest of the community so they can have whatever pet issue they want addressed, then your community is going to get derailed. And that's exactly what happened. We were trying to rehab this property that we had gotten in Morocco. It was beautiful. It was a community property, 3 floors. They had a gorgeous long garden, like Persian garden, right in the front. And so we were going to turn this into like a community center. So I've rehabbed houses before, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a process to this. We got to go through the property. We got to identify any issues. We got to, look into any structural issues that are going to need to be fixed. We need to scrape the walls and paint them with primer. We need to repair anything, all that kind of stuff. And what ended up happening is, in this kind of new age way that tends to happen, that has so thoroughly spread its tentacles into all sorts of different places that aren't even necessarily new age, is the idea that, well, if you feel it in your heart, then you can do it. You don't have to plan. You don't have to ask permission. You don't have to do anything, because we're limitless. And all you have to do is just know in your heart that you want to do it, and God's source universe will make it happen for you. So you know what ended up happening? We had a whole bunch of people running around doing stuff that wasn't coordinated. They spent $1,000 buying paint and all this material that peeled off the wall the next day because they didn't scrape the paint properly. We had a whole bunch of structural issues. The toilet was clogging constantly. It was a nightmare. It was a mess, an utter mess. All of that beautiful energy and ambition and passion basically amounted to nothing because of one thing, I would say. Because the community didn't make sacred excellence, and each individual member of that community didn't commit themselves with humility to the cause of excellence. Because ultimately, as Solzhenitsyn said, the line of or evil is a line drawn through every human heart, something like that. Like, as amazing and as good as you are now, you're going to have a weak point in the future, and your community should help you out there and know how to benevolently call you out on your stuff and encourage you when you're feeling down and these kind of things. So without coordination, without ability to master our behavior with each other and personally commit to whatever community you want to create, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a disaster. And that's what the cabal is counting on. Ultimately, the cabal, I would argue, know exactly what it takes to run a successful community. And they have, at every way possible that we can imagine, they have tried to flip good things into bad things, so that even if they died tomorrow, I mean, I say this all the time, even if Trump rode in on a white horse and arrested every single bad guy, pedophile, creepo you can imagine, and we had the world just gifted to us with no bad guys on it, you know what would probably happen? In 10, 20 years, we'd have a whole other set of bad guys, because the same programming is there, and we wouldn't necessarily learn how to change the thing. But so, you know, that's what the part of this passion comes from that I have for communities and focusing all these issues. So yeah, exactly. It was a bunch of hippies that barely could do anything together. That, you know, and anybody who's listening from that group, if you're still there, I actually love and support all those folks, but we got to call a spade here. We're not going to have a perfect world. We're not going to have a world free of the cabal if we don't have the courage to say what needs to be said. So anyway, all right. Well, I am rapidly losing time, so I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. We've got an ad that I will play, and then I'll leave you open for the next show that's coming up here on Badlands. I will have interviews coming out. I have a really awesome live interview this Sunday with a man who works for Unlimited Hangout, Whitney Webb's outfit. Me and Ryan are going to have a great time with him. I have a couple other interviews that we've recorded, and those will be released over the next few weeks. Of course, we've got the show on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Knowledge Base next week. No doubt Jordan will be back with me to have another rousing conversation. So with that, much love, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time on Knowledge Based.
Don't get me wrong, obviously I love and appreciate what you guys are doing, but are we going to convince anyone differently? It's like we're in such a strange time right now. Are people open to hearing the real story?
He didn't have to do this. He didn't need this job. I cannot think of anyone who has had the constant scrutiny of this president.
But I say all the time, I'm like, if people knew him the way I feel like I know him, we wouldn't even have to be working so hard to tell this story.
The Trump I know.